So, hello, you, whoever's watching this, whoever's watching me. I suppose you've all come here for some horror story. Some story of screams and spooks and all the things you tell your mates at 3 o'clock in the morning to scare them. Well, this is so much more than that. Real ghosts aren't so black and white. Real ghosts don't leave when the lights come up at the end of the film. Real ghosts stick around. I mean, that's the whole point, right? They're here for a reason. So you'd think. I've never fully known if I believe in them. Even now, with me here telling you what happened, with me being here at all, I still don't know. Funny. I used to work at a warehouse, night shifts. Part of one of those local chains. We supplied all the shops in the area, that sort of thing. It was easy work, straightforward stuff, bringing in shipments, sending out restocks for the morning, cataloguing, all that. Like I said, easy. Quiet, too. We ran a skeleton crew most nights, just a handful of us. We all got on well. I mean, same as you get working with or just being with anyone for an extended period of time, really. What I'm saying is, there wasn't anyone I didn't like. I think they'd all say the same about me, but you might get a different answer depending on who you ask. On my way to and from work, I used to pass by a graveyard on this old country road. Ooh, scary. I know, it's not. It's just a bit of grass with dead people in it. I know I'm not really helping my case here, so just bear with me. It's just the thing was that, when I'd stop and think about it, I'd think about how everyone in there was a person. They all had mums and dads and brothers and sisters and friends and all of that. They were people. And I don't think that they're props or scary things for us to use and make fun of. Anyway, so like I said, I used to pass by it every night on my shifts. I'd be coming back home from work in the mornings and the sun would be just coming up. You could see it coming through the trees, and on the one side of the road you had the graveyard, and on the other side there was this massive park, Kingsburn Park. In the mornings a whole lot of it was just covered in sunlight. You could see the shadows of the trees stretching for miles into the park. I tried to take it all in on my way back from work, but most of the time I was just knackered. I just wanted to get home. But, I'd always try. Some days it was easier to try than others. It was one of those days a few months ago when I first saw her. It was like a blur. Imagine that you're looking at a painting, a beautiful hand-painted landscape that you could just stare at all day. And, it takes a few goes to really get all of it, maybe 2 or 3 separate viewings just to take everything in. And each time you come back to it, you see something new or something different until eventually you see something wrong and imperfection. Something that, as your eyes pass across it, you just catch that shouldn't be there or something. But because it's so quick, you can't pinpoint it, you can't see it. That's what it felt like when I first saw her, or the first glimpse of her. It was like the blur of a blur. I don't know how to describe it without sounding stupid. I just knew I'd seen something. Like the outline of someone, something maybe. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I just thought it was, maybe a deer or someone visiting a grave. Nothing important. Nothing scary, certainly. Just life, I guess. Anyway, I just carried on. I went home, got some sleep, had some breakfast. Everything was the same. The next day, I was back in work, and when I was getting ready to come home, it came into my mind again, like it was the first thing I could think about. I didn't slow down that time, but still, I saw her. I got a better look at her that time. It was a little girl. A little girl just standing there in the middle of the graveyard. I could just about make her out through the bushes and the tree line, but she was definitely there. I looked around to see if I could see any parents or anyone there looking after her, but there was no one else there. I mean, it was early in the morning. I just didn't know what she was doing there. So, as soon as I knew what I was looking at, I turned off and I drove up there to go and look for her. I just thought, a graveyard isn't a place kids should be, playing about in. I just thought, maybe she'd gotten lost. The park was across the road and the field. Maybe she'd wandered over and didn't know what it was. I didn't want to get traumatised by it or anything. That kind of thing can mess somebody up their whole life. So I drove up there to where I thought she was, where I knew I'd seen her, and I looked around, but she wasn't there. She was gone, if she'd ever been there in the first place. So there I am, just standing in the middle of a graveyard, the middle of the morning, still in my work clothes, feeling absolutely knackered. Just looked right moron. Anyway, I just did my usual. I got back in my car, went home, got some sleep, some food, tried to put it out of my mind. Well, do you really think I'd be here now telling you this if that's where it ended? Well, it's not. Next day, same thing. I was looking for her that time, and when I saw her, it was like I felt something. I felt this sadness, this deep and all-consuming sadness that almost covered all of me. It wasn't sadness at the sight of her. It felt like it was all around her. And I could see that she looked different than she had done the day before. She looked worse, somehow. At first I didn't notice it. I mean, I was still driving. I couldn't stare at her to keep half my mind on the road, but I could see she looked worse. Her hair wasn't all together anymore. Her dress looked tatty, ripped, like something had happened to her. That's when I got really scared. I mean, I thought if she had gotten lost, maybe she'd gotten hurt, or maybe she was scared. She was hiding from something. Maybe there was something awful happening, and I was just caught up in the middle of it. So I drove up there again to search for her even more. I had to find her. I had to know if she was okay. But she wasn't there. I looked for hours and hours, I wasted a whole day off just walking around a graveyard. Great use of my time. Right. When I went back into work again the next day, I think people could tell that I was on edge. Felt like everyone was walking on eggshells around me. I didn't say anything to them, obviously, but when there's something on your mind all the time, then people can tell. On my way back, I saw her again. In the same spot. This little patch of grass in between two of those big graves with the big old headstones. She was there, staring back at me. Looking worse every time. But by then, I'd had enough. Really, I thought if I hadn't found it before, then it was probably out of my hands, and I should leave it to, the professionals. So I pulled over and I called the police. I told them that I'd seen this girl and that she looked hurt. I told them that I tried looking for her, but I couldn't find her, anything. I told them everything. They said that they hadn't had any reports of any missing kids or anything, but they sent some officers out to have a look. I I really hoped that would be the end of it. You know, when I was lying in bed, it was all I could think about. Like, don't get me wrong, I didn't want some little girl to be hurt, but if she was out there, I wanted her to get found. I just spent the whole night looking online for news articles or Facebook posts or anything I could about it. Nothing came up. I just kept watching that little refresh symbol thing spin round and round again. As soon as I could, I called up again to ask what had happened. Nothing. They found nothing. That's just the way of life, I guess. You know, the one thing I needed, other than perhaps a decent night's sleep and maybe a bucket load of beer, was to know that she was okay, to know that she'd been found, that I could just go to work and see nothing. I went into work again the next day, and for some reason that drive home was the worst. Yeah, I remember being sat in my car in the car park of the warehouse, and I was afraid to drive home. You know, that's such a weird feeling. It's weirder still thinking about it now, knowing what I know. I saw her again as I was driving, staring back at me, but she looked clearer that time, like this fuzziness had lifted off her, and I could see her. I could see her face, her eyes, and blood. It was blood all over her dress. All over it. Looked almost like it was coming from her, like she was hurt. She was hurt all over it. I almost scratched my car when I saw it, you know. Like, it freaked me out. I'd seen cuts and bruises on her before, but nothing like that. I turned off and I drove up there again as fast as I could. You know, I was out of breath. I collapsed out of my car and I just called out to her. I can remember feeling the morning sun on my face as I was just screaming my lungs out to her. I called the police again. I was practically crying down the phone. I mean, I don't blame them for starting to get suspicious of me. They asked me to stay there and they'd be on their way. When they arrived, they took a statement. But most of the questions were about me rather than what I'd seen. You know, about my mental health. Any mental illnesses me or anyone in my family had, my whereabouts. Basically, all the stuff that told me that if some kid did or was going to go missing, that my name would now be at the top of the list of suspects. I felt so alone. You know, like I was just stuck on this little island all by myself. Everyone at work thought I was a weirdo. People in town had started saying the same thing. Although I do want to apologise to that poor dog walker. She must have heard me screaming absolute bloody murder in that graveyard. Can't have been very relaxing for her and her dog. I felt like I couldn't go anywhere else. You know, I was sure I was seeing something. Every day it'd happen. Every day it'd be on my mind. Every day I'd dread it. Eventually some of my friends and family start to notice my, changes. They convinced me to take some time off. I think, to be honest, by that point my manager was happy to give me the time off. Like, everyone else at work was too distracted with avoiding me to actually do any work. I don't blame him. Talking about it helped, that's what everyone says. And all those mental health ad campaigns. I finally spoke to my wife about my depression, and now we have sex all the time. That sort of thing. Or maybe that's just the ads I get. Anyway, I got to talking. I got some sleep, I got some perspective, and I started to feel a bit more normal. You know, night shifts can be proper weird for your body. Like, you're going against every instinct to be at sleep during the night and working during the day. It's weird. They talked to me about the whole thing logically. You know, there were no kids missing in the area, none reported in the wider area either. There'd been nothing found in the multiple searches by the police, and nothing weird going on either. There was no evidence to suggest that that girl had existed. None at all. So that's just what we chalked it up to. Your brain is a weird and scary place. You know, like, it's scarier than most things you're going to find in any graveyard in the real world. I felt better about things. I felt okay with that explanation, at least. But that last time I'd seen her, it really stuck with me. The blood was all over her dress. Her arms and her hands looked mangled. Her neck was sat at an angle, and her eyes almost looked like she didn't even have them anymore. Like, blood was all there was. That pain was all she knew. Just you don't shake something like that off quickly. I managed to become at peace with it. I'd been off work for a couple of months by then, and by all accounts I'd made great progress, but I knew the next step was to go back to work, to move on. The drive-in was tense. Even as I passed the graveyard, I couldn't look at it. I just stared at the road ahead. I just got through it. I got to work. They threw me a little welcome back party. You know, one of those classic crisps on a paper plate, some party rings, knock off cola from the corner shop, and somebody's phone quietly playing the Macarena or whatever in the background. It was nice. So I get through my shift and I'm driving home. It's summer by then, so I've got the window open and I can feel the warmth of the air on my skin. I can smell the freshness of the trees and the grass. I've got my hand out the window. I can just feel the pushback of the air as I'm driving along. Park was starting to get its first few visitors by then. There was a few small groups of kids and their parents all huddled together. I'd been resisting the need to look at the graveyard, to see that little figure staring back at me. But I had to. I had to know. I had to give myself the answer. Finally give my brain the boot and just admit completely and honestly to myself that I had been playing tricks on myself, that it had been my own invention. felt like the road stretched on for hours in that moment. You know, my heart was going like a mile a minute. I took a deep breath and I looked over to the exact spot. And she wasn't there. I just let out this huge sigh of relief, happiness. I can still feel that wave of relief now, followed by the heart stop that came after. I looked back and she was in the road, but she looked like the first time I'd seen her. No cuts, no blood, no injuries or fear, no emotions. Normal, just stood there, staring back at me. I didn't know what to think. My mind just blanked. The fear came back and hit me like a train. Hit me so hard, I felt like I was winded, I couldn't breathe. But I didn't stop. I carried on. I thought about all the things that my friends, my family, my counsellor had said to me. To see the evidence, to see the logic. She wasn't there. I remembered the brief feeling of relief I'd had when I'd not seen her. I remembered all the promises I'd made to myself to not go back to being that person I'd become before I took that break. I remembered the looks of my co-workers. I remembered all the changes I'd made in myself. And I carried on. I just closed my eyes and kept going. I knew that she couldn't hold any power over me if I didn't let her. Even before I opened my eyes, I heard the scream. I think because I had my eyes closed, I felt the bump and the rise of the car much quicker than if I'd seen what had happened. I slammed on the brakes as hard as I could. It didn't matter. I opened my eyes and I saw the clear road in front of me. That picture that I had been staring at for months was finally empty, except for the nature that surrounded it. I felt my eyes start to fill with tears, and I was squeezing so hard on the steering wheel that I started to burn my hands. Fear and sadness at what I already knew had happened. I just a bit down on my lip, just holding back the flood of emotions. And everything I felt in that moment. I looked up into the rearview mirror and I saw her. this crumpled little pile, not moving. She had been there that day anyway. She'd wandered off from the park and out into the road to play. She was dead. What I'd seen all those days, all those weeks before, a premonition of her death, a premonition of what I would do. I don't know. Maybe it was the spirit or the soul of that girl returning to watch me before it even happened. To warn me, to hate me, to make me understand what would happen, to help her understand what happened. I don't know. I'll never know. I just know that those are the questions I ask myself in the middle of the night. Those are the questions I ask myself every day when I look in the mirror at the person staring back at me. When I'm alone and I've got nothing else to distract myself with. Those things I will carry with me forever. They'll never be gone. Not until I am. In the end, they buried her in that exact spot. The little patch of grass between two graves with the big old headstones. Where I'd seen her every day. Where I'd seen what would happen to her. Every time I visit it, the sun always lands perfectly on it. I don't have any final poignant words to say on this. No message or moral or reason for my experience. Because life doesn't hand us reason things happen. Sometimes things happen for no reason. Things happen that we can't, that we shouldn't try to understand, because it's altogether too terrible, too painful. Everyone has their burden. This is mine. And that's the end of it.